Don't want to tell me what that parking ticket is for? Okay. I'll get that ticket thrown out in court, along with jeopardizing any ticket the city wrote on that same form. TLDR. Way too long way of saying I got a parking ticket. Wasn't satisfied with an answer to a basic question about the violation. Fought it in court and won, with the judge ruling that every ticket the city had written on that form was suspect. The ticket this was mid to late 90s in a northern Midwest, mid-sized city. Parking near my apartment near a university was only on street parking. Bad in the best of times, it got miserable in winter with alternate side parking eliminating half the parking on major streets such as where my apartment was. Failing to find any parking, some nights I would risk it. Sometimes I got a ticket. Sometimes not, but at least I typically knew why I got the ticket until one morning. I was cited for violation number 27. I had no idea what that was all about. It wasn't an alternate side violation. Not an expired meter issue. Not a loading zone thing. I just didn't know what it was. What did I do wrong? I went by the office to pay the ticket and I asked the clerk, BTW, what is violation number 27? I don't know and don't want to get ticketed for. Whatever it is again. Her reply set me off. We don't have to tell you. Oh, excuse me. I took my check out of her hand picked up my ticket. It was the 90s. I told you it was a long time ago. We used to write out little slips of paper called checks that the recipient could take it to the bank and deposit. Half you kids reading Reddit have probably never written a check. I'm old. Sue me. Now get off my lawn. I asked her who could tell me. She shrugged. Maybe the prosecutor's office, she replied. I left, ticket unpaid. I stopped by the prosecutor's office, ticket in hand, to ask. I apologized to the receptionist for such a ridiculous waste of time. I just wanted to know. And she rolled her eyes at me. I got nowhere there. Digging in my heels, doing legal research for a poor recent college grad, I certainly wasn't going to waste my money with a lawyer but was hard-headed enough to want to know what violation number 27 was before I paid it. I resolved to go to the public library and pull out the law books with the city ordinances and state statutes. Library, a physical building with actual printed books where people used to have to go to look up information before everything was online. I'm old. I told you, and stay off my lawn. I settled in, flipped through pages, cross-referenced ordinances and statutes, and found something interesting. Possibly it was very interesting. I checked the court date on the ticket and made up my mind. I would well fight City Hall. Court time I showed up in court. Some paperwork was handed out to those of us who were present. Just before it was to be my turn, the prosecutor graciously offered to let me pay the ticket plus court costs to make this go away. It is a AMN parking ticket. I'm already here. Why bother? After waiting my turn, I stepped before the judge. The judge said a few things. The prosecutor said a few things. And then it was my turn. Your Honor, I move to dismiss the ticket based upon a due process violation on the 14th Amendment. I think that prosecutor might have gotten whiplash, her neck snapped so fast. I told my story. I just want to know what violation number 27 is. I looked. It's not in the law books, not in the city ordinances. I am being charged with something without being told what it is. And the judge smiled a bit, turned to the prosecutor, and said, I've been waiting for someone to bring this up. The prosecutor's jaw dropped. Your Honor, I went on, state statute requires certain elements to be on any citation for it to bevel it. Among those things is a citation to statute or ordinance. And there are a couple other issues with the ticket. It does not conform to the statutory requirements for a citation. The judge turned to me and asked if I had the ticket. Yes, ma'am, I do. And she asked if I had the paperwork that was handed out when I arrived in court. I did. And then the good judge took a few moments to walk us through that paperwork to show that neither the parking ticket nor the paperwork contained the requisite statutory elements for assignation or summons. Then the judge advised she would take the matter under advisement. The verdict a few weeks later, I got a big manila envelope in the mail with the judge's order. In clearly written legalese, she went step by step through my argument, the requirements in statute and ordinance, and the utter failure of the city to write a single valid parking ticket on their standard form in many years. Years ago, parking enforcement officers actually took a pen and physically wrote in ink on a 3-part pre-printed parking ticket form. Barbaric, I know. They didn't have handheld computers to print them out. This was just a few years after we figured out that banging 2 rocks can make a spark to start a fire. I told you I'm old. And what did I tell you about staying off my lawn? She detailed that the city, to allow their parking enforcement officers to write tickets faster, used their own list of violation numbers. Expired meter number 1, no parking zone as number 2. That did not correspond to any section numbers of the statute or ordinance. If you didn't have the list, you just might not know. And the judge threw out my parking ticket as a due process violation of the 14th Amendment. Oh, and that violation number 27 was parking too close to a handicapped ramp. I didn't see it under the snow. My bad. Didn't matter. I had moved out off town by then, forcing someone to live up to their threatening promise. It was January 2022. A new wave of COVID hit, and it devastated the workforce in the major cities here. On average, about half the workforce for any industry was homesick for about a week at the same time. Shelves in supermarkets weren't stocked because there weren't enough workers to keep them full. The number of bus routes were cut in half. The list goes on. At my retail store, all but 2 of us were sick. With 2 people on staff, we couldn't get to everything, so we had to decide what parts of the job we'd neglect. Most of our revenue is from online sales, so we decided to close the store and focus on dispatching online orders. We still had to answer phone calls and emails though, so we were very stressed. This was only happening in the major cities, of course. More rural locations dodged the major disruptions. One day, I got a call from a customer. He placed an online order the day prior, paid for express post, but noticed it hadn't been sent. He called, asked why it hadn't been sent. I looked on his account, and saw he lived in a rural town hours away. This was the conversation. Customer: Hi, I placed an order yesterday with express post. Why hasn't it been sent yet? Me: Very sorry. There's only 2 of us on staff because of COVID and we are doing the best we can to keep up with the online orders. Customer: But I paid for express. Me: Yes, and as I explained, there's only 2 of you in staff. We've had to close the store, and there's a lot of orders to pack and we pack them from oldest to newest. We're trying our best. Customer: Well, your best isn't good enough. I paid for express, it should have been sent out by now. My best wasn't good enough? What an absolute piece of hit. At this point, I had dealt with enough stress, so I let him have it. Me: Paying for express doesn't mean we pack the order faster. It means that once the courier has it, they deliver it to you faster. That extra money you spent doesn't go to me or this company, it gets to the courier. There are orders older than yours. They have priority. They have waited longer than you and will be packed first. Customer: I don't care. You need to ship it today. Me: I can't promise that. Do you have any idea what COVID has done to the workforce here? Customer: No, and I don't care. If you don't ship my order today, I promise I'll never shop with you again. I genuinely laughed out loud at that. Me: I literally could not care less. It's no skin off my nose. At that point, I hung up. For the entree of my revenge, I purposely skipped his order even though I caught up to it. It got sent the next day. The main course though, that was tasty. I blocked his account so he couldn't shop with us again. He promised he wouldn't, so I wanted to make sure he didn't break his promise. He tried to though. He made another account. He recognized the name, and confirmed it was him through the shipping address. I canceled the order and processed the refund. For revenge's dessert, I did something truly petty. When you process a refund, you reverse the payment made by the debit card. You can put a note in it when you do so the customer knows why that money is reappearing in their bank. The note I put was, to help you keep your promise. Sure. Call the landowner. So, when I was 13, I was really into snowboarding, so every chance I got, I was out doing that in winter. Though in recent years, I could do so in July. There was one huge hill that was open to everyone all year long, so long as they didn't cut trees or wreck the place. This hill was located on a plot of land in the woods that, a few months prior to this event, had gone from being for sale to bought by my uncles to keep it from being bulldozed. Nobody really knew these men were me uncles because we all have different last names and my dad's family is huge. That comes up again later. One of the parents said that myself, anybody who wasn't a baby in a sled had no right to be there as we were too big and violent to be using that hill. And generally let the kids steal or otherwise damage the boards, skis, or do things to drive everyone else away. I largely didn't care because when I went there, I just used my cheap $10 board that was built about as well as a plastic sled. So I didn't have to carry my bigger, better one across town. That, as you can imagine, pissed these Karens off more. I never really understood why they were so unhurt over it. They could take their kids sledding anywhere, and there were even public roads that were shut down in winter because they were too dangerous to drive on that people used all the time as sled spots. That were also much closer to home and safer because no tree line to collide with, fallen logs, or chances of coyotes deciding their kids were snacks. After about a week of them constantly nagging and itching, I finally said, look, you can sled anywhere you want. Me? Because some *SS holes decided to wreck property and trespass, I can't even snowboard on my own property because the neighbors complain that I might break their fences unless I want to pay hundreds of dollars to go to some fancy resort. This is the only place I can snowboard. On a plot of land half a mile wide, I'm fairly certain we can all enjoy it. I didn't wait for a response, I just went on down the hill, swerving to avoid all the kids who think laying down in the middle of a place everyone I asked skiing, snowboarding, or sledding is a good idea, and thought that would be it. But, as you can guess, I was wrong. I was never the best at stopping, so I stopped when I hit the trees, thankful that they were still rather bendy. Over the sounds of laughter and snow being shredded, I heard the Karen screaming and turned to see her at the top of the hill, pointing at me and calling me every name in the book. Apparently, she called her husband, who confirmed they lived nearby, and said that 1. I had threatened her, 2. I had called her everything in the book, and 3. I was a grown adult. At 13, I was maybe 3 feet 9 and looked like I was 10. Her husband died to fight laughter when he saw me stomping back up the hill, wearing a hot pink Barbie snowsuit and carrying a cheap Monster Energy, black with electric green board under my arm. He asked what I had said, I repeated it and admitted I knew cursing was wrong but expressed how annoyed I was. He tried to calm his wife but she screamed more and said, I'm calling the landowners. I smiled like the Cheshire Cat and told her, go right ahead. I'll speak to them, too. So she did and she launched into a huge rant, very animated with lots of flailing and hopping similar to an angry hen. Finally, when she starts losing steam, I can hear one of my uncles saying, I'll bear right there, sit tight. The hitty smile that spread across her face when she heard that, she sneered at me and said, I'm going to get you into much trouble. Her husband had gathered the kids and told them to wait in the truck by then. Hell looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die of embarrassment. After about 15 minutes, a truck pulled up and out hopped my uncles. They came over and spoke to the woman. I could tell they didn't 100% believe Herbert because this was their land. If anything happened, they'd be on the hook for it. She got loud again and demanded I be banned for life, and all that. They looked around and asked her to point to the dangerous and disrespectful woman, as clearly, I was the only one snowboarding that day. She huffed and grabbed me, giving me a shake as she shouted, this itch here. Despite it being the middle of January, I swear I heard crickets as the wheels in their heads turned. Knowing these men and how much like their own kid they saw me, it was mostly to keep from yeeting this woman into the sun. Finally, one of them spoke. You mean our niece? Karen sputtered and tried to come up with some sort of response but failed miserably. My uncles then gave her the choice. Leave now and come back in a couple days. They'd drive by to make sure she stayed away. Or continue acting how she was and they'd press charges on her to have her banned and charged with assault for gabbing me as well as being on the hook for any damages her kids caused to anybody's gear. Apparently they'd been getting calls but nobody knew her name so the cops couldn't do anything. She huffed and stormed off, her husband following and looking like a beat dog. She never did come back.